What does one say to an ancient Nephilim ghost?
I suppose you start with...
Beat that, you little trout sniffer.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
What's going on YouTube? It's Filthy and we're back with another video. Season 30 sees the return of Soul Shards, so we're going to go through them, what they are, what they do, how to get them, and all that kind of thing. We're going to use Max Roll, which still has got all of its old D3 content archived on it. Obviously they're doing much more D4 stuff now, but we still can come on here and have a little play around and look. See, I will link this particular page in the video description, so if you want to come and go through it yourself, that's absolutely fine. But I know some people just like to listen and maybe hear a couple of little extra bits or thoughts, because we have of course played through the full season 25 now, so we do know some extra things about the Soul Shards that maybe we didn't know at the beginning of the season. Thumbs up always brightens my day, guys, but other than that, let's just jump straight in and talk some Soul Shards. Now, these are like a special type of legendary gem. They go in either your weapon or they go into your helm. There are 4 lesser evils that go in weapons. We've got the Dreg of Lies, Essence of Anguish, Remnant of Pain and Stain of Sin. All can be socketed into a weapon. Then in your helm, you can take a Fragment of Destruction, Shard of Hatred or a Sliver of Terror. You can take 2, so you can take 1 from the weapon list. You can take 1 from the helm list. You can't take 2 from either. So let's say you've got a build that dual wields, you cannot take 2 of the lesser evil soul shards. You can only take 1 of them, but you can have another one in your helmet basically. So that is kind of handy. If you want to farm them specifically, you want to go and do the relevant act bosses. There's a list, we'll go through that in a sec. Just blasting GRs will have plenty of these, you will have lots of them, but it's going to be random. So it's like a 1 in 7 drop chance every time one drops as to which one it's going to be. So let's say Sliver of Terror is quite a popular one. If you specifically want to target this, you're going to have to go to Act 4, you're going to have to run some bounty bosses. That's going to be the fastest way to get like 5, 10, 15 of these Sliver of Terrors. But ultimately, if you just want to kind of see where the season takes you, you will get plenty of them to drop. I got plenty on PTR. They are upgradable by Hellforge Embers. Initially, this is going to be your limiting factor because they are more popular than a gift. Bigger drop chance, but I'd say only by like a factor of like 5 or 6. I did struggle for Hellforge Embers on PTR, and that was going to be blasting like really fast content, 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, whatever. I still felt like I didn't have enough of them after only a week. I mean, of course, we're trying to set up multiple builds, so it's going to be a bit of a bottleneck to start off with, but as the season progresses, you will have loads of them. And one of the reasons for that is because each time you swap build, it's going to be that there's probably a few kind of meta choices for, a lot of builds will use the Remnant of Pain, a lot of them will use Essence of Anguish, a lot will use the Sliver of Terror, some of them will use Dreg of Lies, and you'll be looking for like the same kind of final form, the same kind of unlocked stats on them. So whilst you will need multiple copies of them, and you will need to explore many of them, when you do get one that's perfect, you might find that actually it transfers over to like 3 or 4 builds you're going to play. Again, that depends on you, depends how many characters and whatever you're going to set up. If you're just going to come on and just play one class, one thing, then once you've got it perfect, then you're not going to need any more, are you? Now, if you do get ones that roll badly, so after you use the Hellforge Embers to explore them and open them up to like rank 1, 2 and 3, well, each one is an augment. So it starts off at rank 50 and then you add 25 levels for every upgrade, so a 3 level upgrade Soul Shard is 125 augment. That's great because it means that you don't have to go and do an Echoing Nightmare key to get an augment, and it's not a complete waste of time. Really quickly on the Alter of Rites, because that is coming back next season, it means that you can just put a level 0 Soul Shard and augment it straight onto a weapon and get the altar unlocked, so that is pretty handy. The way that it works is that you have to obtain them from the act bosses or Rift Guardians. They can drop just randomly anywhere, but if you want a specific one, Essence of Anguish is found in Act 1, so go and kill, I don't know, probably the Butcher is probably the easiest boss to go for that. Dreg of Lies, you can't do Vidium, so the latest Act 2 boss, but you can do Zoltan Cool, you can just do him over and over again, he's right next to the waypoint, that's quite nice. Stain of Sin, Fragment of Destruction, Act 3's a little bit harder. I'd probably go for the Siege Breaker, because again, it's always in the kind of same place. Asmodan also is fairly quick run as well. It's probably shorter actually than Siege Breaker. Siege Breaker is probably quite far. Act 4, Remnant of Pain, Sliver of Terror. I would be going to do Rakanoth, I think, for Act 4, simply because he's in the same place every time. And then we've got the Shard of Hatred in Act 5, and I guess you'd probably go and do Malthael. Again, he's in the same place every single time, so once you know where you're going, it's probably pretty easy. Quick note, Darkening of Tristram is likely to be on. We haven't heard any confirmation. It's all completely radio silence from Blizzard at the moment, but assuming that is on, you can hopefully go down and kill the Butcher and get basically all 7 Soul Shards. I think he's on like level 2. I'll have to go back and look at my Darkening of Tristram event video, but you can get all 7 like almost immediately at the start of the season. Why is that important? Well, what you can do with the Soul Shards is you can salvage them, and they've got gems inside them. So you can get the absolute max square gem, which is obviously amazing, or you can get 3 Imperial ones. If you get a diamond out of your salvaging of Soul Shards like early, you can use it in the Alter of Rites and unlock the second requirement, which is the item level. No item has got any level requirements at all, and that means you'll be able to like power level yourself to 70 really fast without using your Challenge Rift cash. If, let's say, this works, you go down to the Butcher, get all 7 Soul Shards, you're going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams at the start of the season, even without doing the Challenge Rift, and that's going to like kick your progress along a lot. The follower doesn't work with them. You can't get an extra one in your follower's weapon and helmet. You can put them in, they just don't do anything other than providing the stats. So if you want to min-max your follower out with either some plus main stat to get up to the 25k limit, some attack speed to proc some things earlier. Another thing you can do, good tip that somebody points out in one of my recent videos, is if you do want to roll poison damage on your follower's weapon, you can get that to activate the Essence of Anguish, which generally speaking needs poison damage for you to do something else, so you can do that as a little kind of hack. Ranking up the Soul Shards, they start off at 0, so you find them, they've all got the base effect to them, which I don't know if we're going to go through those. Oh yeah, we'll go through those, I think, individually each. They've all got a base effect. You then find an Ember, take it to level 1, find another Ember, it goes to level 2, and then the third Ember takes it up to its essential final form. Now, when you take up to level 1, it's kind of like the gem turns into every regular gem in the game. So it's like having a ruby, it's like having an emerald, a diamond, an amethyst, and a topaz. So if you upgrade to level 1 in one of the weapon gems, you get plus damage, plus crit hit damage, elite damage, life per hit, and thorns. Early on in the season, that's going to be quite a big power boost, so it would be very tempting, I think, for me to just like upgrade the first Soul Shard I find. But again, if you've got a build in mind that you're wanting to put together quickly, when you go and do the Butcher, save the shard that you want to use for your build and salvage the others. Same deal for the helmet. It's like you get all of the regular gems. So you get life percent, cooldown reduction, and resource cost reduction. Gold, finds, and experience are really not very helpful. I suppose neither is Thorns really, unless you're playing a Thorns build. But still, these are decent powers to pick up. Cooldown reduction, resource cost reduction, life percent is generally quite handy, particularly on a fresh character before you've got your Hadrig's season journey done. Leoric's Crown and Broken Crown do not work with Soul Shards. Now, gems are probably going to be a little bit of a bottleneck next season. Again, if you're playing and augmenting up multiple suits and multiple builds, then gems is always a problem. It's going to be even more so this time around because you won't have the Broken Crown effect unless you take the Soul Shard out of your helmet. So I guess doing bounties, doing Torment 16 runs, anything that is going to be like really low level, super easy stuff, it might just be worth not actually taking a Soul Shard. Again, it depends on how many augments you want to do, how you are for gems and that kind of thing. You could just simply swap it out and go do a load of puzzle rings to get some gems from that. Visions of Enmity, of course, are coming back. You can get Goblin Fields, you can get goblin gems in there, gem goblins in there, so that's a good source of gems potentially. If you do lots of those, eventually you'll hit a goblin field. Same for Echoing Nightmares, you get the Goblin Shrine. That's going to be a bit of a balance for you to decide, but just be careful, because even though you put a Broken Crown on the follower, doesn't mean you're going to get extra gem drops unless you take the Soul Shard out. And of course, Leorix does not double the value, because that would be insane. Also, the life per hit bricks pretty much any Shimizu build, because obviously that relies on having really low health, and life per hit will just shoot your health up. Now, when you take it from rank 1 to rank 2, we get a kind of fixed roll. So there's 4 options for the weapon: attack speed, damage percent, crit hit chance, and elemental damage. Now, which is better is going to be really dependent on your build. If you've got a build that stacks lots of elemental damage, then maybe just flat damage is going to be better. If you're doing a dual wield build, well, again, because it only applies locally to your weapon, it's essentially going to kind of halve the damage, because that particular weapon's getting the 10-15% damage increase, but your offhand weapon isn't. So you need to be a little careful with these things. But generally speaking, other than min-maxing everything out, I'm looking for damage, I'm looking for crit hit chance potentially, but there are some crit hit mechanics with the Soul Shards. Elemental damage, if you just keep it simple, plus damage or plus elemental damage, and if you're dual wielding, go for elemental damage, and then look up a build guide later and really try and min-max and perfect it out. Helmets, the 2 most desirable, funnily enough, are actually the damage reduction, because we deal so much bonkers damage in this game now that 20% melee or 20% range damage reduction is going to be a pretty big deal. Armor is okay if you're on an int class, but it's really not desirable. All res is a pretty terrible roll, whichever way you slice it. Again, okay if you're not an intelligence based class, I guess, with some toughness, and then any of the main stats, so you could end up with the main stat for your build, which would be decent. So you're already at like a 1 in 4 chance of getting what you want on the weapon side of things. Then you've got the roll on it, which is like looking like a choice of like 3, 4 or 5. So even at level 2 with just 1 upgrade, you're already potentially only about 15% of the time gonna get, maybe even less, 10% of the time gonna get like a perfect roll for what you want. So as you can see, it's gonna take a lot of time, I think, to perfect these out. At rank 3, they've all got a different like final form power, and there are 3 for each of the gems. So again, you roll your 1 in 10 chance to get something perfect, and then you've got to do a 1 in 3 lucky dip as to what it's going to be. So I guess let's just have a look at the primeval Soul Shards. So these are the ones that go in the helmet. So Sliver of Terror base effect, cooldowns are increased by 25%. That is bad. They all do come with a negative, but then they all give you something good afterwards. For every skill on cooldown, 12.5% damage reduction and 12.5% increased damage. You've got theoretically max 6 skills you can get on cooldown. Sometimes it's hard to get more than 4 or 5. Again, depends on the build, but the more skills on cooldown, the more damage you're going to do, the more damage reduction you're going to get. Of course, that is a pretty good trade-off. Basically, what it's saying here is that don't forget that all of the damage stacks together, toughness stacks together. So just kind of think of it like that. Final form number 1 for the Sliver of Terror is the Ring of Fire. So after you kill 100 enemies, you cast a devastating Ring of Fire. Looks really cool. For speeds, it's crap, but for pushing, it is going to be one of the most meta choices, because it deals a fixed amount of damage. So you're going to fish really hard, try and get a map that has got lots of enemies that can be killed quite easily, try and drag an elite over to where the fireball thing is going to go off, which would be where you are stood when you get your 100th kill, and then you're going to hope that will kill the elite, and then you're going to like go and drag a load more trash and just keep kind of doing that basically, and hope that that is enough to spawn you a condi, and then the condi can get you going, and you can kind of cycle the conduit into the Ring of Fire, keep going with the condi, blah blah blah, the usual kind of like pushing cheese. The second final form is attack speed and crit chance increase, 5% for both of them for each skill on cooldown. So again, this could work out to be like 20-30% cooldown reduction, and attack speed could be very nice. Sorry, not cooldown reduction, attack speed and crit chance. Yeah, could be pretty good. Speed farm builds could be good. Just again, kind of depends on the build. And then the final one is Lightning and Fire, which of course is only applicable for builds to deal this damage, but if 3 or more skills are on cooldown, Lightning and Fire damage is increased by 50%. So Fist of Heaven's Crusader does lightning damage, Wave of the Light Monk does fire damage, so they're 2 kind of main categories. It is basically just an extra 50% onto your elemental damage, so bear in mind the more elemental damage you stack before you add 50% on, the less impactful this is. So if you've got no elemental damage, obviously you haven't built your character terribly well, but then that would be a 50% damage increase. If you've got 500% elemental damage, which obviously isn't possible, but then adding another 50 would only be 10%, so you need to kind of bear that in mind. So it might well be that the attack speed and crit hit chance is going to be the best, but similarly it'll depend on each particular build. Like the Crusader, for instance, I couldn't tell much difference between the 2, but it wasn't completely min-max, so it could be either of them. Looking at the Shard of Hatred, base effect, you deal 15% reduced damage when you have 3 or fewer enemies within 25 yards. So reduced damage is never a good thing, but if you do have more than 3 enemies within that 25 yard radius, you deal 5% increased damage per enemy up to a max of 50%. This is a separate modifier, so in essence this can be a 50% damage increase. So obviously this potentially pairs quite well with like a Nova Necro, where you're looking to kind of leverage the amount of mobs around you anyway. Whether it's good enough to get through the rift, obviously it's a lot less damage on the Guardian, and most of the time the Guardian is the problem and the limit for pushing, so again you kind of have to kind of work out whether that's better. A really good single target build that does a lot of single target damage might benefit more than others, but we will have to see. Final form number 1 for this is increased damage. We deal 10% increased damage instead of 5, up to a maximum of 100. So essentially you can double the effect of it. Basically says this upgrade just gives you damage. It's what you use in every pushing or trash killer build. So there you go. What we're saying is that that's going to be the meta. Now that's not what I saw on PTR. What I saw on PTR was like a bazillion Ring of Fire. So again, this article might well have been written before season 25 and obviously not updated, but I saw on the PTR boards tons of Sliver of Terror with Ring of Fire, and I think that will be kind of how it goes. But if you are doing trash clear in a 4-player, then yeah, maybe just taking this extra damage would be better. Final form number 2, we've got a pull, so killing elite enemy pulls enemies within 40 yards to where the elite died, maximum of 16 targets. As it says, this upgrade is quite bad, can be useful for some things, but I probably just wouldn't mess around with it. It sounds really finicky, I would just leave it. Final form number 3 is interesting on the Shard of Hatred, which is move speed. So move speed is increased by 50%. Each enemy within 25 yards reduces move speed by 10%, up to 70%. So basically if you're moving along, you get a 50% increase, and then as soon as enemies come within range, you start slowing down. So it's a little bit like it zooms you between packs and then slows you down at packs. So something like a Gears of Dreadlands Demon Hunter would be great with this, because you're probably going to flatten most stuff, and then you'll keep up your move speed most of the time. Useful for Nephilim Rifts and Bounties. Again, whether people go with that, I'm not entirely sure. I think the Sliver of Terror, just adding more raw damage, is probably going to be better. But again, depending on the build, depending on how much you play, you might get to the point where damage is just you're one-shotting everything anyway, so you may as well pick up move speed with a Shard of Hatred. Last one for the helmet is the Fragment of Destruction. You may move unhindered through enemies. That is now completely useless because we get this power from the altar, so it's a slight benefit until you unlock that node in the altar, and after that it is now pointless. But each enemy you pass through receives a mark of destruction for 7 seconds. Each marked enemy that dies removes 1 second from one of your skills on cooldown, so like the Messerschmitt's Reaver. If the mark of destruction expires before the enemy dies, you lose 2% of your max health as damage. Marks not applied if you're below 35% health. So if you're under 35% health, this gem does nothing. If you're over 35% health, you basically tag something, you've got 7 seconds to kill it. If you kill it, then you get 1 second off one of your skills, so Messerschmitt Reaver. or you lose 2% of your health. It also will kill you, and it will bypass cheat death. Basically, I think that this is kind of pants. I did try the Pestilence Necro with this. I just think it's going to be quite ineffective, particularly Pestilence, because you're firing the lances automatically everywhere. It's quite fiddly to get stuff targeted with Mark of Destruction. You know, like if you're doing Gears of Dreadlands again, you'll flatten everything before you get there. Maybe there's a bit of use in something like an Inner Monk, where you could just be getting your cooldowns, but ultimately I just don't really see that being particularly used too much. The base effect, not great. Let's look at its final forms. So number 1 is Heal on Kill. 25% chance to restore 5% health when an enemy dies with the Mark of Destruction active. Pretty rubbish. So it says completely useless for supports and speed farming. I wouldn't say it's worth it. It's basically giving you 1 or 2 life per kill secondary rolls on your armor. I wouldn't take it. Second, when you apply Mark of Destruction to an enemy, increase your move speed by 5% for 7 seconds, max 10 stacks. So 50% move speed could be good for speed farming or support. Again, whether you'd choose it over the extra damage to just go higher. Because we don't have to do Torment 16 farming very much anymore, because we can just get our keys from the Visions of Enmity, I think this is really questionable benefit, but I suppose bounty build, if you wanted to go get some items, could be okay. And then the third one, Execution. You now leave a trail of fire in your wake and slay enemies with a Mark of Destruction that are below 10% health. So you get the Executioner axe essentially, and the Firewalkers. I'd say pretty rubbish. Support Soul Shard, sure, if you're going to push, then the extra 10% off the final boss is going to be helpful, but other than that, pretty bloody useless. So really, the main one I think is going to be the Sliver of Terror. That's going to be the most use for the most people. Maybe some use of the Shard of Hatred, and the poor old Fragment of Destruction. I don't even think I used on PTR once, but we'll see. So looking at the lesser evil shards, these are the ones that go in the weapon. We've got the Essence of Anguish. Base effect, every time we deal poison damage, we increase our cooldown reduction and move speed by 2.5%. Whilst damage received is increased by 5% for 10 seconds, max 10 stacks. So extra 25% good cooldown reduction, 25% move speed is nice, but we take double damage, so 50% damage increase. It's not double, 50% extra. So again, these are just like separate stacking effects. You need to have poison either on your ability, or if you're playing a class that doesn't do poison damage on your weapon, or do the follower trick as we talked about. But Witch Doctor and Necro have got poison skills. Used in DPS builds that lack better options, whilst it doesn't provide any huge benefits, downside is very mild. I'm not so sure I agree with the mildness downside here, because we are going really high with speeds now. It's like 120, 125, 130. Monsters hit pretty hard. If you've got builds that involve squirts, you're already getting extra damage taken from squirts. Extra damage taken from the Essence of Anguish can potentially be a little bit tricky. You can completely ignore the base effect of it. Just don't take poison damage on your follower's weapon, your weapon, or a poison skill. So you can still use the final forms of it. That's what I ended up doing on PTR, because I just felt that taking extra damage from squirts and extra damage from the Essence of Anguish just meant that I was dropping my shield on my Gears of Dreadlands Demon Hunter too much. So I just said, screw it, off it comes. The final forms are, we get 15 stacks, so move speed and cooldown reduction now increased 15%, or 15 times rather, by dealing poison damage. So that means max cooldown reduction and movement speed to 37.5. Great for speeds, bounties. Maybe if you do some T16, this is maybe where you go. We've got poison debuff. When you deal poison damage to an enemy, they receive 50% increased poison damage from all sources for 10 seconds. So again, we've got that poison damage requirement. Debuffed enemies will have all of the damage taken increased by 50%. So it is obviously great for DPS, but also in group play as a potentially powerful option. And then the one that I used the most on PTR was the poison explosion on kill. When you kill an enemy, you deal damage done by the death blow to all enemies within 25 yards. Your pets and your follower can't trigger it, so pet build, you can't take this. But this does actually work quite well. Now, the poison damage can stack the primary effect of the shard, so you do need to be a little careful. I suppose I didn't really notice that on PTR, so every time I was doing a poison explosion, I was opening myself up to the negative effect. So there you go, you actually can't get rid of the negative effect of that. That's why it's useful to read these things.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Fuck.
If you kill multiple enemies with one attack, then only one explosion is triggered. But again, GOD, each Hungering Arrow comes out, it will kill something, so it did seem to go off quite a lot, and you can't trigger it from area damage procs. Remnant of Pain, we get crit hit chance reduced by 15%, but attacks against incapacitated enemies automatically count as critical hits. Really interesting this, because 15% crit chance being reduced is of course bad, but if you can get incapacitation off frequently, then you're going to have automatic crits. You don't need any crit chance. So thinking of something like a Necro that has got Brittle Touch rune on the Corpse Lance for Pestilence, which is freezing with frozen lands, or increasing the chance of being crit on a Z Necro, you could do some interesting things with this, I think. So incapacitated basically means hard crowd controls, so stun, freeze, fear, blind, or charm. Interesting, it doesn't say provoke. I was hoping provoke would count, but I guess not. Maybe it means that a provoked enemy can still attack, and maybe that's why. Automatic critical hits apply, even to attacks that normally ignore crit hit chance, such as Thorns and Thorn-based skills. So I guess that means Thorns can crit next season, which is interesting. Yeah, so it's things like Crispin Sentence. You're looking for the bonus, control and pairing effects. Is going to pair really well with that. Now, we've got 3 final forms. First one is cold damage. Hitting with cold has a 50% chance to freeze. Freeze, of course, counts as the incapacitated enemy. That then means that you're getting, constant crits. And then 20% extra cold damage. Inner Monk came to mind for me for this, but of course the Inner Monks freeze everything anyway. So if it's already frozen, the 50% chance to freeze. So all you're really getting is the 20% extra cold damage, and then the fact that it is an automatic crit hit. So theoretically, you could play Inner Monk and roll crit hit chance off all your stuff. Obviously for speed farming, not for pushing. It would be handy, maybe. Whether you want to fiddle about with it to that extent, obviously it's up to you. Freeze duration is 3 seconds. Damage bonus is a separate 1.2 modifier that applies to all cold skills, so it doesn't look like it gets added to your cold elemental, it's just a straight modifier. And skill that applies to the freeze is not affected by the bonus. So if you don't have a good way to do CC on demand, then maybe it's something you could use. Next one is the speed pylon. You gain passability and move speed bonus when your move speed bonus is over 50%, and you move through enemies, knocking them back and stunning them for 2 seconds. The stun, of course, counts as the incapacitation, so it gets that guaranteed crit hit off. But the passability, again, we have got that with the altar, so we don't really need it, I don't think. Anything that where you want to time your own crowd control is terrible, because stunning with the speed pylon effect will just make things crowd control immune. And then the third final form is attack speed. When you critically hit an enemy, you increase the attack speed of all players for 5% for 5 seconds, up to 50%. The attack speed bonus is additive, just like a normal roll on gear, aside from your weapons. So DPS builds that scale with attack speed, and I think this was the one that I did try with the monk, or I briefly tried it, but then I swapped onto the pet one. So again, which one's going to be best for which build will really depend, but of course good support gem, because increased attack speed for everybody is going to be good. Dreg of Lies, this is the one I actually used for the Inner Monk on PTR. You deal 25% less damage, but your pets deal 25% increased damage as the base effect. This is great because if you do want to do pets whilst you're leveling, maybe on a Necro, maybe on a Witch Doctor, or maybe you get the Mystic Ally boots on the Monk, then you're going to get 25% damage if you can find a weapon with a socket. Stacking damage, so this is the one where every time your pets hit an enemy, damage is increased by 0.5% for 5 seconds, stacks up to 100 times, so 50% damage when it's at its max. When you get to 100, it resets very quickly down to 0 and then starts building back up again. It's about 20 to 35% bonus multiplicative damage, so all DPS pet builds use this one. Again, I did have a question on one of my videos about is it better to do the guaranteed crit. I didn't test the two, but this is what Maxroll is saying. Maxroll is saying the pet build, and I think that's probably why I used that one. Second final form, cheat death is terrible. You basically get an extra cheat death. Like theoretically on hardcore, you might want to take this, but I think you'd be better off to just play conservatively, play within your means, and pick up the extra 30% damage. And then CDR on elite kill. This is an interesting one for something like a Necromancer. Killing an elite gives you a active cooldown reduction of 5 seconds. So it's like half an in-gem. So it could be interesting. There could be something you could do with this for speed farm building. Again, I didn't get much time to test this on PTR, but maybe if you took an Ingeum and this, and Messerschmitts with the Necro, you could just permaland the dead, flip. But of course, you would be losing modifiers. So you know its viability for like any kind of end game-ish speed farming's nil. It would just be maybe we could get GR90 blasted very quickly. And then the last Soul Shard is the Stain of Sin. You deal 25% less damage, already massive thumbs down, but when you kill 50 enemies, you spawn a pool of blood that increases damage done to elites by 150% for 15 seconds. Basically, you'll use it for supports and maybe if you did some T16 runs. But other than that, losing 25% damage just to get this like pool on the ground is a pretty naff deal. Negate affixes. The pool of blood now negates elite affixes in its area. This upgrade is never used, but hey, I tell you what, it would be nice for shielding and stuff like that, but yeah, probably not good enough to take. Extra progress orb. You get an extra orb when you kill an elite pack. Could be used for supports and speed farming. I don't know if this stacks with the extra orb we're already getting from the altar. I suspect it doesn't. But if it does, then that would be helpful. And then auto pick up orbs. Again, this is not going to be used simply because 1, you get really good pickup radius these days anyway, and 2, with the altar, we get huge pickup radius once you've unlocked it. So the altar has kind of taken a couple of the things away. So yeah, Chewy wrote that. Brax did a video on it on season 25. So you know, by all means, go and watch those. But as I say, we have had the benefit of playing through this. I think it's going to be a fun season. It's going to take a long time, I think, to perfect these things out. I kind of like that slow incremental improvement to your build. Level 1, 2, 3, then making sure you get the right rolls on your third form and on your second one. Then making sure that you get the max rolls on the level 2 upgrade and the level 3. I think gives us something to aim for on a multitude of builds. So that's what Soul Shards are, that's how you get them, that's what to do with them. Remember, salvage them for gems, use them for augments once they're at level 3 if you don't want to put them in your build. And yeah, have a lot of fun, blast some content, and may the primals rhyme from the sky. I've been Filthy Casual, take it easy guys, peace.